Hello friends, and welcome back to this course titled as British Poetry. Friends, we are today starting this poem Porphyria's Lover, written by a Victorian poet Robert Browning. Friends, in the last unit 10, we talked about a poem Kubla Khan, which was a benchmark in romantic movement. S.T. Coleridge was the poet, and the poem was a, let's say, masterpiece of supernaturalism and the other romantic traits. In a way, the poem Kubla Khan is considered as, let's say, one of the best poems or one of the best products of romantic literature. Now, through this poem, Porphyria's Lover, written by Robert Browning, one of the most famous poets of Victorian literature, there are many others, Tennyson, etc. We are going to deal their works in the coming units. But before then those, we have to get a glimpse of the, let's say, Victorian literature, Victorian temper, Victorian zeal, Victorian, let's say, manner of thinking, Victorian attitude. All these things you will get to know through this poem Porphyria's Lover by Robert Browning. Friends, before starting the poem Porphyria's Lover and discussion on what this poem is all about and Robert Browning, you must have heard a word related to romanticism and specifically related to Byron. The term is Byronic hero. If you search it on Google, Byronic hero is a term associated with any fictional character who do not repent on his or her act. Whatever, let's say, act is performed in wildness by that character, maybe Byron himself in some of his works, that wildness never brings a guilt in, let's say, the mind of the character, suggesting a character that is independent, individual, had the superiority complex and a freedom of a different kind. Similar kind of character, not exactly, but somehow similar kind of character you will find in the appearance or the portrait of the lover in this poem Porphyria's Lover. The word, friends, you have to understand that the word which is associated with this person is lover in the title, Porphyria's Lover. But he is not only a lover but also a killer of his beloved. He kills his beloved. But even then, at the end of the poem, we will to an extent appreciate the ecstasy of love which this lover has, unnamed lover has in this poem Porphyria's Lover. So, to understand the philosophy of Robert Browning, to understand the context of his poetry, to understand Victorian temper, we are trying to do the critical analysis of this poem, Porphyria's Lover. Friends, another important thing related to this poem is that this poem is a dramatic monologue. We are going to discuss about it in this lecture and in the coming lectures also, because there is one more dramatic monologue introduced in our syllabus. We are going to discuss that in the coming units. But for now, you have to understand a very simple definition of dramatic monologue. One, the situation will be dramatic. A drama kind of situation will be created by the poet. So, this specific kind of poetry written in the form of dramatic monologue is not just a poetry but a kind of drama, showing the characteristics of dramatics, the dramatic skills. On the other hand, this poem is written in the monologue form. Monologue means there will be one speaker and the listener in between the speaking or in between the speech of the speaker will give some kind of hints suggesting that there are silent listeners of the speaker. In the case of this poem, we have the beloved who ultimately dies, or let's say ultimately murdered by her beloved, by her lover. And then we have, let's say, a lover who kept on expressing his ideas, or I must say his psychological, let's say, understanding, his psychological analysis can be done on the basis of this dramatic monologue or this poem, Porphyria's Lover. The first part of this poem which we are going to take and discuss in today's class is the dramatic monologue. How we will justify that this poem is a dramatic monologue? So, what will be the lecture outcome of this 30 minutes lecture? You would be able to analyze Porphyria's Lover as a dramatic monologue. Why this poem is called dramatic monologue? Obviously, we will take some lines from the poem, and those quotations are going to prove to you that this poem is a dramatic monologue. What are the characteristics? You will also able to, let's say, identify, locate the characteristics of dramatic monologue writing through this lecture. So, without wasting any more time, let us now move to the poem. Porphyria's Lover is a poem by the British poet Robert Browning, first published in 1836. Friends, 1830 or 31 is called as the beginning of the Victorian age, and since Robert Browning was born in the Romantic age, then he wrote in the beginning of the Victorian age. So it is obvious that his poetry writing skills are the combination of Romantic poetry and Victorian temper. Along with My Last Duchess, it has become one of Browning's most famous dramatic monologues due to no small part to its shockingly dark ending. Friends, the poem has a dramatic kind of ending, a shockingly dark ending, a murder, a conspiracy, but it also has the passion, the love, the ecstasy of emotions. There is another such poem written by Robert Browning, a dramatic monologue again, My Last Duchess. And I must suggest you to read that poem also to get a holistic approach of the poems or the writing style of Robert Browning. In the poem, the speaker describes being visited by his passionate lover Porphyria. Friends, we let's say see in this poem that the speaker is describing that he is going to be visited by the, let's say, Porphyria or the passionate lover. After realizing how much she cares for him, however, the speaker strangles Porphyria and then props her lifeless body up beside him. So, in the beginning of the poem, friends, we see that the speaker is saying that how much Porphyria loves him, and after some time he strangles him, maybe with some cloth or maybe with some rope. He tightly knits his neck, her neck, and then she dies. The lifeless body is not thrown away by the lover, but he keeps it beside him. He then concludes the poem by announcing that God has yet to punish him for this murder. So, now friends, such kind of statements are not given by a person who has guilt of his act. Maybe he is feeling proud that after death, punishment given by God to him, he would be in a position to reunite in the afterworld with his beloved. So, this murder can be considered by this lover as a one step towards getting the love of the beloved. While the speaker is often taken to be a madman, his very twisted motivations seem clear. In killing Porphyria, he takes control over her, transforming her into an obedient object that will remain pure forever. Friends, we see that in this process of murder, we come to a conclusion that this lover is a madman. But he had many, let's say, motivational things to say. The things which motivated him to kill Porphyria, his beloved. He wanted to take control over her. She must react according to his whims and fancies. He wanted to transform her into an obedient object that will remain pure forever. Why? Because he thinks that he is pure, which is why he wants that Porphyria must also behave according to his concerns. And in this way, in this process, she will also become pure. In Porphyria's lover, the lover is placed in such a moment which is of utmost significance to him. So, there is a moment, friends, which is shown in this poem where the utmost significance or the utmost significant act is committed by the lover towards the beloved. It is a moment for which he longed throughout his life. And what is that moment? The moment is unification with the beloved. He wanted his soul to unify with the beloved. It is a moment containing a lifetime of desire, of intense passion and surge of happiness. Friends, we see that in this moment, there is a lifetime desire of intense passion and happiness, which is achieved by the lover. Why? Because the beloved is now under full control of the lover. He wanted to dominate her and he has achieved that target. With his lady love in his arms, he could desire nothing else. With an almost explosive passion, he exclaims. Friends, when we move further in the poem, we see that now the dead body of the beloved is in the arms of the lover. Now he desires nothing else. He possesses her body. And in this, let's say, explosive passion, he gives this statement in the poem, in his monologue. He says, and I quote the lines from the poem, "That moment she was mine, mine, fair, perfectly pure and good." So, he saw his beloved purified and sublimated by this triumphant love. So, we see that his love has the ecstasy of dominance. He wanted to dominate the body of the beloved and he was able to triumph love by killing her. From the beginning, Porphyria is shown to be a reassuring presence. The lover was vexed by a fierce storm before she bought into the sense of claim. Friends, when we start reading the poem, we see that the poem begins with a strong storm. And the lover is waiting in a hut in a remote area. Maybe the storm is representative of the mental turmoil of the lover. Porphyria is shown as a reassuring presence. She is going to come. Maybe she is moving towards her death. And the lover is, let's say, waxed by a fierce storm. Maybe he is confused that because of this critical weather, she is going to come to meet him or not. Before she brought in a sense of calm. And what is that sense of calm? As soon as the beloved comes to meet, let's say, this person, lover, what happens then? When she enters into the hut, she shut the cold out and the storm and kneeled and made the cheerless great blaze up. So, we see that the beloved, as soon as she enters into that house, every kind of, let's say, turmoil, turbulence is out. And inside the hut or that house, everything becomes cozy and comfortable. She kept coldness and storm out, and then she comes inside and kneels down in front of the lover. Maybe it is suggesting that she wants to, let's say, surrender herself, her soul, to the blaze up body of the lover. She brought with her warmth which melted her lover's heart, making him warm both literally and figuratively. Friends, we see that there is a warmth which comes in the house of the lover and maybe in the heart of the lover also. Now, warmth has two meanings. The first meaning is that the warmth represents the comfort in the body of the lover. On the other hand, it also, let's say, melts the heart of the lover, means now all of his emotions are melted down and he now becomes a, let's say, brutal person who can kill his beloved. It was the ultimate gift for his tormented soul, which was full of insecurity. It was this moment which he desires to eternize. When we look at, let's say, the personality of the lover, we see that maybe he has got everything in his life. When she comes into his house, let's say, the ultimate gift for the tormented soul of the lover is the appearance of the beloved. with him. It was full of insecurity. He came into insecurity. He expected that moment to eternize, maybe to get a pause. Nothing should move now, and he should not come out from that moment. He was genuinely afraid of the transience of that moment, of wish fulfillment. With a flashing moment, he not only decides to kill his beloved, but also commits the crime. So, this statement clears the, let's say, reason of killing his beloved. What is the reason? He wanted to his beloved to always remain in his house. So, not alive but dead, because he was afraid that this moment is going to pass. She will leave after some time and he will be alone in his life. So, he thinks of committing this crime of killing her. Furthermore, he goes on to find justification in divine silence as well. And God has not said word. Note that he expected the punishment at all. He was rather certain of divine approval. Friends, and these lines are quoted from the poem, when poet says in his dramatic monologue, and God has not said word, suggest that he is getting an agreement from the side of God. God is willing for the murder of the beloved. Maybe this approval is a kind of approval, silent approval, which Adam and Eve has achieved at the time of eating the fruit of knowledge. But human beings don't know that God never, let's say, instruct any human being, but they motivate human beings to do good things or bad things in their life. Within a span of 60 lines, Browning presents not only the character of a lover, but of Porphyria as well. Friends, this poem is written in total 60 lines, and we are not even able to, let's say, critically analyze the character portrait of the lover, but the beloved as well. True to the spirit of the monologue, she is presented as the ever silent listener. Her silence continue even to that moment of death. Friends, when we look at this poem, we see that the silence of the beloved has many things to say. She became silent after her death, but even before her death, she was silent. Did not say a word, no dialogues, no conversation between lover and beloved. The moment was so strong that they do not have to interchange words to understand the ecstasy or to communicate with each other. Their souls were interacting with each other and they were, let's say, silent communicators in that moment. Thus, her silence continues even to that moment of death. So, we see that in that moment of death, when she was about to die, when she was about to lose her senses, there is a conversation going on, and poet has excellently presented it in these lines. And I quote from the poem: "No pain felt she, I am quite sure she felt no pain." So, the lover is saying that he did not see any, let's say, hint of pain on the, let's say, face of the beloved. Maybe she wished to be killed by the hands of her lover. Her silence was possibly a result of her inability to revolt against established conventions of society as well as the murdering lover. Friends, when we read this point, we find that this dramatic monologue is not only a love poem or a suspense thriller, but this poem is also a social satire, and it has a universal message in it. Let me tell you how. Every day we read in newspapers that a girl and a boy who loved each other committed suicide. What is the reason? The reason is most of the time social pressure. Society has its own beliefs, conventions, ways of doing things. And when we look at let's say, this poem, we see that the similar kind of conventions might be forcing the beloved not to marry her lover, which is why she takes the decision of breakup. Although she wished to live with him, but that kind of, let's say, murdering is justified by the beloved as well. Yet she remains true to her commitment, which is admitted to her lover. So we see that when she is, let's say, killed, she remains true to her commitment. What is that commitment? To, let's say, admit her lover, Porphyria worshipped me. So you can understand that there is a juxtaposition here. The girl who is murdered is worshipping her murderer. Porphyria worshipped me. Although this is the perspective of the lover, but maybe Porphyria also feels satisfied by getting killed by the hands of her lover. The portrayal of the lover is so fine that his crime, instead of creating outright horror and disgust, arrests the reader's attention by virtue of its complexity. Friends, when we read this poem, we understand that life is not black or white, and the murderers are not always bad. But we feel that the life and the human mind is complex. The poem is not about horror and disgust, but the poem is about emotions, virtues of complexity. The entire poem throbs with the vitality of realism. In fact, realism was the central working principle of Browning's poetry, and elemental passion was certainly a part of it. Friends, and we had seen it in the other poems of, let's say, Victorian age as well. There is a societal realism. The central working principle of Browning's poetry was that realism and the mixture of passion. Porphyria's lover is a representation of the elemental instincts at its highest point, where the lover kills his beloved only to possess her forever. So we can see what kind of situation is this. You want to get someone, so you kill that person. It is quite interesting to note that the poem is scripted apparently as a defense of the lover's action. Friends, when we read this poem, we assume that Robert Browning is trying to justify this murder. He is in support of the lover, and which is why he has written this poem in the form of a dramatic monologue. There is not just cold logic or intellectual analysis. A subtle mood is evoked with an almost impressionistic stream of consciousness technique transforms the monologue to absolute poetry. Friends, when we look at this poem, we see that there is a very strong stream of consciousness which is visible in this poem. Impressionistic approach. There is, let's say, a sea of ideas, a sea of, let's say, thoughts which is going on in the mind of the lover. And he plans to murder the beloved with that kind of, let's say, critical condition. On the other hand, there is calm and peace which is shown on the face of the lover as well as beloved after the death. This makes David Dacius is one of the established critics. So we are here talking about his observation. This makes David Dacius observe that Browning's dramatic monologues project with an almost quizzical violence a certain temperament in the self-revelation of a type. Friends, David Dacius believes that when we look at the dramatic monologues of Browning, they are, let's say, projected with an almost quiz-like violence. There is a violence which is, let's say, a kind of quiz. Nobody understands whether that violence is good or not. There is a certain temperament which is visible, which is a very different kind, and a self-revelation of the type. When we read this poem, we understand ourselves because we are human beings and we don't know how human beings think. So Robert Browning, through the excellence of his poetry writing, is trying to, let's say, critically analyze the different dimensions of human mind which are still unexplored, and maybe the, let's say, psychiatrists are still going deep to understand these human emotions. That is all for today. Thank you for listening.